So we'll get started and I'll call this meeting to order. And just so people don't think I'm making some political statement, there's another meeting that needs me in attendance in about 15 minutes' time. So the vice chair has kindly agreed to take over right after the public portion of the meeting. So thank you very much. So I will read out the notice of collection statement. Personal information collected as a result of this public hearing and on the forms provided at the back of the room is collected under the authority of the Planning Act and will be used to assist in making a decision on this matter. All names, addresses, opinions, and comments may be collected and may form a part of the minutes which will be available to the public. Questions regarding this collection should be forwarded to the Director of Planning, Building, and Licensing Services. The purpose of public meeting is to present planning applications in a public forum as required by the Planning Act. Following presentations by an applicant, committee members will be afforded an opportunity to ask questions for clarification or further information. The meeting will then be open to the public for comments and questions. Interested persons are requested to give their name and address for recording in the minutes. There is also a sign-in sheet for interested members of the public at the back of the room. No decisions are made at public meetings concerning applications unless otherwise noted. The public meeting is held to gather public opinion. Exemption to this rule is outlined in bylaw number 2006-75 to delegate various planning approvals to staff and to adopt certain procedures for the processing of public applications subject to delegated authority. Council has authorized staff to use discretion in determining if an application can be a combined public meeting comprehensive report to expedite the approval process. We do have a combined public meeting comprehensive report for a zoning bylaw amendment at 798 Riverview Way. A decision will be made at the regular portion of the planning meeting tonight. Information gathered at public meetings is then referred back to Planning, Building, and Licensing Services staff for the preparation of a comprehensive report and recommendation to Planning Committee. This means that after the meeting tonight, staff will be considering the comments made by the public in their further review of the applications. When the review is completed, a report will be prepared making a recommendation for action to this committee. The recommendation is typically to approve or to deny. This committee then makes a recommendation on the application to City Council. City Council has the final say on the applications from the city's perspective. Following council decision, notice will be circulated in accordance with the Planning Act, and anyone with an interest in the matter may file an appeal. Interested persons are advised that if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of council to the Ontario Municipal Board, unless, in the opinion of the board, there is reasonable grounds to do so. And our first and only public meeting tonight is before us. It's file D14-002-2018 for 798 Riverview Way. So, would the presenter like to present? Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much. Thanks for having me here today. I've never been to the city of Kingston City Hall. This is quite a beautiful building that you have, that you have here. So my name is Diana Kay, and I am the consultant planner on this project. The project itself is for a zoning bylaw amendment application in order to permit a sewage pumping station on 798 Riverview Way. There's a lot of background information that I'm going to present to you today just to give you an understanding of how we got to the zoning bylaw today. It's quite an extensive process with respect to the sewage pumping station. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of a presentation overview. So the purpose of the application, the property description, some background information, the zoning bylaw amendment itself, the planning justification that was completed on behalf of the rezoning application. We'll go on to site plan control, agency comments that we received to date, and then the summary and recommendations. So DM Wills, on behalf of Utilities Kingston, submitted the zoning bylaw amendment application in January of 2018. Again, the purpose of the application is to permit the installation and construction of a new municipal sewage pumping station on the subject site. This, I'm going to start referring to the sewage pumping station as SPS, just to make it a little bit easier. There's going to be a lot of abbreviations through this. The SPS itself will provide sanitary services to the Riverview subdivision, which is phase 3, as well as the existing, I'm going to try and show you a picture here, as well as the existing residential development that's located to the north of the Riverview development. Currently, that development to the north is serviced by the River's Edge sewage pumping station, and once the Riverview development sewage pumping station is in place, the River's Edge SPS will be decommissioned. So in terms of the project location, it is located at 798 Riverview Way. And you can see on the key map the subject site. I'm right there. And then up here is where the existing River's Edge SPS is located. Actually, I'll go back a bit. So just to give you a little more context, the Riverview SPS is proposed to service this particular area here, and then part of the development within this location. This is the subject site itself. It is approximately 520 square meters. Site access will be through this road. It is an access road that is currently described as Block 4 on the plan of subdivision, and that will be transferred or allowed for the city to have access to the facilities. The surrounding land uses, so the subject site is right here. To the north, we have some significant woodlands, and there's also the proposed development, which is the Riverview development. The south of the property is the quarry development, which is also slated for future residential development. To the west, you have, again, natural heritage features, the significant woodland, and an area of natural and scientific interest, as well as the river. And to the east is the Riverview development, phase 3. So this part of the presentation will give you some of the background information. There's quite a bit, so bear with me. The first part with respect to this property, in 2012, development applications were submitted to the city for plans of subdivision and condominium, as well as the zoning bylaw amendment was submitted in support of the application. The development applications were subsequently appealed to the Ontario Municipal Board in 2014 for lack of decision. And it was through that OMB hearing that the development was approved, as well as a large swath of land was zoned to floodplain exception 4, which is the current zone on the subject site. In support of those development applications, there were a lot of supporting studies that were done. I'm not going to touch on any of them except for the ones that are relevant to this application today, so that way it gives you an understanding of how we ended up here. And those include the demonstration report, the sanitary sewage report, and the environmental impact study. Sorry. Sorry, I'm just going to grab my notes here. So this then brings us to the municipal class environmental assessment, which I will now refer to as the Class EA. So from those reports, various recommendations were made. The sanitary sewage report that was prepared by AECOM indicated in a recommendation that in order to service the western portion of the Riverview development, a new sewage pumping station would have to be constructed. Now, once you go into new construction of sewage pumping stations, you trigger a municipal Class EA, and that brings us here. So in 2013, our firm, DM Wills, was retained to undertake the Class EA, and that Class EA would examine the required sanitary system requirements and upgrades to service this Riverview development, as well as the development to the north that I showed you previously. And of course, a lot of background studies were completed in order to support the project itself. So another environmental impact study was completed, a natural heritage review was completed, geotechnical investigations, and a heritage impact assessment. Now, these are all important because when you're going through the Class EA process, you have to analyze all the potential impacts, whether it's social, environmental, economic, cultural heritage, and that will help you determine what is the most appropriate alternative. So based on the analysis through the Class EA of all of those impacts, there were various alternatives. However, 3 alternatives were evaluated further as they were the most appropriate choice. So throughout this process, 3 sites, as you can see here, these were the 3 sites that were further analyzed with respect to the socioeconomic and the biophysical environments. So the alternative number 1 is located on the southwest corner of the Riverview property. Alternative number 2 is on the northwest corner of the abutting quarry property. And the preferred alternative, which is subject to the zoning bylaw amendment today, is on the southwest, not southwest corner, but on the southwest side of the Riverview development. So it's just backing off of the lots that you would see in phase 3. So as I mentioned, there were several impacts that were reviewed in order to arrive at these decisions. However, for the sake of simplicity and to keep this brief, I'm only going to touch on the 2 impacts that were key factors in determining which of these 3 sites was the most appropriate. So as I mentioned, it's alternative number 3 as a preferred alternative for this particular site. And the 2 impacts that we're going to look at are the environmental impact as well as the economic impact. So I'll just go back to the map. The alternative number 1 is located, according to the environmental impact studies and the natural heritage reviews that was completed, is completely within a significant woodland as well as a provincially significant area of natural scientific interest, which I will refer to now as an ANSI. The alternative number 2 is on the adjacent property. It is within 120 meters of these significant features, and it's also located on a steep slope. And then alternative number 3, the preferred alternative, it is also located partially within the ANSI and within the significant woodland. However, it was determined that through the environmental impact study and the natural heritage review that was completed, this area has been cleared of any significant features, and all the vegetation that is currently now growing there are invasive species. So out of the 3 environmentally, this is the best choice to locate the sewage pumping station. And the second impact is the economic impact. So in terms of alternative 1 and 2, because of where they're located, additional infrastructure is required in order to service them, and that would cause even further issues with respect to the environment, because you're going to have to bring down the infrastructure in order to service these 2 locations. That's not the reality for the preferred alternative. It doesn't need additional infrastructure to service that site. So in the long term, it is the most cost-effective to implement out of the 3 choices. So through the Class EA process, much like the planning process, there's heavy consultation, and any relevant agencies or interested stakeholders are circulated and afford an opportunity to comment on the application. And this is where the city's planning department had indicated that the preferred alternative is within the floodplain exception 4 zone, which doesn't permit any development, and therefore rezoning is required, which is why we're here today. So after some analysis of the history of why this property was zoned for floodplain, I couldn't find anything. The original demonstration report showed just along the shoreline that should be zoned floodplain, while the balance should be open space. And open space for this particular area makes sense because they're natural heritage features, and the open space zone allows for the protection of those features. So in support of the rezoning application, DM Wills prepared a planning justification report in support of the application. And through that justification report, we reviewed the provincial policy statement, the City of Kingston official plan, as well as the Township of Pittsburgh zoning bylaw. So, in terms of the provincial policy statement, the key policies in here are with respect to infrastructure and public utilities. So the provincial policy statement provides that planning for infrastructure shall be coordinated and integrated with land use planning so that they are financially viable over their life cycle and available to meet current and projected needs. As well as section 1.66, sewage, water, and stormwater. The PPS provides that planning for sewage services shall ensure that these systems are provided in a manner that can be sustained by the water resources upon which the services rely, is feasible, financially viable, and complies with all the regulatory requirements and protects human health and natural environment. So through the Class EA, these policies were evaluated and weighed through that process. So through the phase 1 and 2 Class EA, the first phase of the Class EA, you're looking at the problem and opportunity statement. So you're looking to determine why the infrastructure improvements are needed, as well as to clearly identify what's being investigated. And then phase 2 of the Class EA, you're looking at the various alternatives in terms of socioeconomic and biophysical environments that I just mentioned, as well as geotechnical conditions. So the criteria in the Class EA helps establish this process. And through the Class EA, it was determined that the site is appropriate, that it's financially feasible, and therefore the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement. With respect to natural heritage features within the provincial policy statement, as mentioned, there were environmental impact studies and natural heritage reviews completed. So the PPS indicates that you have to protect natural features for the long term and that development and site alteration are not permitted unless it can be justified through an EIS, and that was completed. And with respect to the recommendations in the EIS, the preferred alternative is the best site because it's already been cleared and is now overgrown with invasive species. However, there are recommendations within that natural heritage review that can be implemented. So when the site is being constructed, we're ensuring that the scale, the size is appropriate, as well as the natural features around it are protected. So next is the City of Kingston official plan. The property itself is designated environmental protection area, as well as a small portion that is low-density residential. The environmental protection area provides that development is not permitted within this designation. However, that does not include activities that create or maintain infrastructure authorized under the environmental assessment process. And as a result, the sewage pumping station or public uses are permitted. In addition, the general provisions of the official plan indicate that public utilities may be permitted in all land use designations, provided they are made compatible with surrounding uses, and that all works are carried out in accordance with the Environmental Protection Act and the Ministry of Environment regulations. And finally, the OP also permits new public or private works or utilities where such facilities are not feasible outside of the EPA. And this has been established through the municipal Class EA process. As a result, the application conforms to the City of Kingston official plan. So now we're going to the Township of Pittsburgh zoning bylaw, and obviously the application or the site does not conform to the city's bylaw or the township's bylaw, pardon me, and as a result, an application was filed and is here for consideration today. And given the fact that there are natural features on site and it doesn't contain a floodplain zone, we have recommended that an open space zone would be more appropriate for this location. And the official plan does allow, as I mentioned, for public uses to be available in any zone. So it would be permitted, and with an exception zone, this particular utility would be permitted on the subject site. So as I mentioned before, there are mitigation measures that can be applied to the site, and in order to do that, we need a mechanism because we can't impose conditions on a rezoning. So through that, and because the City of Kingston requires that all utilities go through site plan, we would have to submit a subsequent site plan in order to facilitate and implement the development. So under the site plan control bylaw, we have submitted a site plan application for this particular site, and through that site plan, the recommendations in the Natural Heritage Review Report can be implemented as conditions of site plan approval. So when development is happening, we're ensuring that it's with regard to the mitigation measures. I've listed them here. I'm not going to read them. There's lots, but it's just to ensure that the natural heritage features are remained and intact. With respect to agency comments, no one appeared to have any objections or concerns, which is great. Save and except the building department, and I believe it was a general comment, however, they indicated that a building permit would be required. Now, with respect to this type of building, it's not really a building. Under the Ontario Building Code, with respect to structures that are less than 10 square meters and that contain plumbing, they would be considered a building. However, plumbing means a drainage system, a venting system, or a water system. So because this facility doesn't have any of those, there's no plumbing within the structure within the facility, and therefore it doesn't actually meet the definition of building under the building code. So a building permit would not be required here. So just to summarize, the application went through a Class EA and determined that the subject site is the preferred alternative for various reasons, especially with respect to the environment and the economy. It is consistent with the provincial policy statement. It conforms to the City of Kingston's official plan. There are no anticipated impacts to the surrounding natural heritage features, and the subject site is located without a floodplain. So we deem it appropriate to rezone the subject parcel to an open space zone from the floodplain exception 4 zone. And subsequent to this application, if it is approved, it will be subject to site plan approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from the committee? Seeing none? Are there any staff clarification you'd like to make? Thank you.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair. I can confirm that the this application was noticed under the requirements of the Act, and that included public notification provided on site through the large signage. It also was noticed in the local newspaper, and public mailouts were sent out to the neighbors within 120 meters of the subject property. And I believe after this, I'll provide a short overview as well.
Thank you very much. Go to the committee. Any questions, comments? Any public comments? See, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Frank Dixon, 495 Alfred, Department 2. Thank you to Ms. Kay for the presentation, very thorough and well explained. Learned a lot from that. I just have several basic questions. The reports that you referred to on the environmental assessment details, are those available on the city website?
Yep.
Usually you take the questions and then answer them at the end.
Okay. Thank you.
So,
Sorry.
yeah, so that's question number one. Are those reports available to public somewhere? Okay. So question number two, my only concern is the proximity to the quarry. And we've had issues out in the western part of the city, which was Kingston Township at the time, when they were doing some work out there and there were issues on what happened with the quarry that was already there. So I'm sure that's been looked at in the reports. Looks like the site that you propose is about 100 meters away from the quarry, so that's a fairly good distance. Okay, and as my final question, just has to do with the station that this is going to replace, if it's approved, right, to the north of this proposed station and then to the north of development. What is going to happen to that site when it gets decommissioned? Could it be possibly rehabbed environmentally and used for development, or is it forever out of the picture as far as I'm concerned? It's not really so much with this development, but I'm just concerned on the outcome of that. So thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else from the public like to speak at this point? Okay, thank you. So would you like to answer those questions?
Yes,
us,
thank you,
please?
through you, Ms. Chair. The report for the municipal class environmental assessment is available on the city's website, and the appendices contained most of the reports that I've indicated. The reports that were submitted with the municipal class EA are on the city's website. They're the appendices. However, the ones that were submitted with the subdivision are not. It would be a much older file. With respect to your second question, the proximity to the quarry, it is very tight. Our engineers looked at it quite thoroughly and ensured that the site can accommodate the facility itself, and there's no concerns with respect to the development or the quarry property to the south of the site. And with respect to your third question, I will defer to Jim from Utilities Kingston. Thank you.
Yeah, if I may, the existing pumping station that's located in the River's Edge subdivision, that is municipally owned property. It is a municipally owned facility. When we decommission any facility, the land that the facility is located on is municipal property. The land simply reverts back to the care of the city's real estate division. I have no idea what it will eventually be used for, but that is ultimately will be the caretaker of that property.
Thank you. Would the committee have any more comments at this point? No? Okay, thank you. That concludes the public meeting. So we'll move into the regular Planning Committee meeting number 052018. I'd like to bring that meeting to order. Okay. Could I have a motion for approval of the agenda, please? Councillor Osanek and Councillor Osterhoff for that. Okay. Could I have a vote, please? Could you vote on that, please? Thank you. Carries. Confirmation of the minutes. Can you vote on that, please? Oh, could I have a mover and a seconder, please? I'm new at this. Sorry. Lisa, Councillor Osanek and Councillor Osterhoff. And can we vote, please? Thank you. That carries 4-4. Okay. So then. Okay, so. Is there any pecuniary interests? I see none. Delegations? No. So then okay. So, further business. This portion of the meeting is open to the public. The city has initiated a new process in which members of the public will have the opportunity to speak for up to 5 minutes on comprehensive reports presented before the Planning Committee. Those wishing to provide oral comments at this meeting will be invited to do so. However, because this is not a public meeting, pursuant to the requirements of the Planning Act, in order to retain appeal rights to the Ontario Municipal Board, one must have provided oral comments during the statutory public meeting and/or provide written comments in advance of a final decision by council. So, now we're going to move into file number D14-002-2018, comprehensive report, address 798 Riverview Way. Okay.
So there's going to be a staff presentation for this one too.
Okay, great. And now we'll move into the staff presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm going to duplicate what you just heard, and in much less detail. So we're speaking about 798 Riverview Way. It's I just put on here part of 1232 Highway 15 because some of the notification went out identifying the subject property as being a part of that larger landholding. So as we all know, the applicant is seeking a permission to construct a sewage pumping station on the subject property. And this was identified through several years of a Class EA process that it was needed to provide sufficient, reliable sanitary servicing for to service that area. So as you can see on the map here, the subject property is located in white, and the reason that there's a blank between Riverview Way right now is because that's phase 3 of the final plan of subdivision for Riverview. The entirety of the Riverview subdivision encompassed 262 parcels, residential parcels, and that phase 3 is approximately 65 parcels, and that's subject to final plan of subdivision currently. Just quick on the OP, as you can see, it's designated EPA and low density residential. And in the zoning bylaw 3274, Pittsburgh Township, it's in a site-specific floodplain zone. Again, just a quick shot of the parcel itself, 520 square meter parcel, several buildings, some below grade, some above grade, and where they're located on the parcel seen here. I just threw this slide in very quickly to try and capture what this structure facility may look like from the ground for some of the residents who will be living in the neighboring subdivision. So it's not as though they're proposing a massive structure that's going to be humming and making all kinds of noise at all the times of the day. It's very small, and it looks similar to this. As I mentioned earlier, the public notification was provided in accordance with the Act. That went out to the property owners in the area. Signage was also provided on site. And to date, we've received no public correspondence. So there's an exhaustive explanation to the background to how we got to this state, so I'm not going to really get into it, but there were several years of work leading up to why this was a suitable site. And the key point that I want to mention that was key to me anyways was that the CRCA, Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, along with Parks Canada, have all reviewed the file throughout the years and determined that and are suitable and satisfied that the subject property is the best. So again, we're in a site-specific zone, floodplain zone that's very tightly written in that it restricts the ability to construct any building or structure. If we were in a general floodplain zone, it would allow that, but the site-specific is unique in that it prohibits that ability. So what we're proposing to do through this application is to rezone that to a site-specific open space zone. And the reason it's a site-specific is just so that we have a little bit greater control in regulating the setback distances and the open space requirements. But the open space parent zone does allow that public use. And that's really what we're going for, because a public use is essentially a pumping station. So with that, staff's recommendation is to support the zoning bylaw amendment here in front of you tonight, as it conforms to the PPS and the city's official plan. It specifically allows further residential development in the neighborhood, which is in the urban containment boundary, to be expanded upon. As mentioned, it's in the site-specific open space zone, so it's quite a small property, and the uses are very restricted in that they're only really able to have the opportunity to construct a public use on that site. So with that, staff recommend approval for the zoning bylaw amendment. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation. Would councillors have any questions at this point? Seeing none, would the public have any questions?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I just thought of one more thing. How is the design of this particular project as compared to the one that's nearby, the one that's just to the north? Is it fairly similar?
If I may default to the applicant to provide a much better explanation than I.
Relative to the physical space above grade, I would say it's relatively similar. The station itself, the facility and the volume that it will manage is larger than the facility to the north, obviously, because it's accepting those flows plus the new development flows. So, but that's mostly in terms of the underground equipment and what we call a wet well, and the size of the wet well and the pumps and those sorts of things. But physically, the structure above grade is relatively the same.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions from the public? Seeing none. Any comments, questions from the councillors? Seeing none, thank you for your presentation. I think we can vote on this now. So, all in favor? Oh, sorry. Yes, I need a mover and a seconder, please. Mover by Councillor Osanek, seconder? Seconder? Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? 0. Thank you. It passes. Okay, so. On to the next file, number D35-007-2017, comprehensive report, address 120 McAdoo's Lane, official plan and zoning bylaw amendment. I believe there's a presentation for this. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair, committee members, and members of the public. I'm just going to provide a brief overview of the applications before you at 1201 McAdoo's Lane, as well as just highlight some of the public comments we received in regards to this application and staff's recommendation. So the purpose and effect of the applications is to amend the official plan and zoning bylaw to permit rural industrial uses and prohibit residential uses on the site to allow for the development of a logistics terminal, essentially a trucking facility on the site. The official plan amendment application is also to facilitate a severance application to permit an engineered drinking water system in order to service the proposed use. So the property is located on the south side of McAdoo's Lane and consists, the portion of the property subject to the applications is the proposed severed piece, which is approximately 6 hectares on the westerly portion of the site. McAdoo's Lane is primarily rural, contains a number of rural industrial land uses. Immediately to the north of the site across the road, there's a commercial industrial use, a quarry. To the west of the site is a cement manufacturing facility, and south of the site is vacant rural land. There are some residential uses located at the very east and west end of McAdoo's Lane, with the closest residence being approximately 600 meters from the subject site. This map here displays the official plan designation on the entire parcel. So it is designated in a rural designation with a small portion in the southwest corner containing a rural industrial designation on it. Because the development being proposed is a larger scale industrial use, there is a requirement to obtain an official plan amendment to allow this type of use, and the official plan provides a number of criteria outlined in it, and when you're contemplating land use changes such as this, such as providing whether infrastructure is appropriate to the site, and compatibility issues, and also looking at protection of natural heritage features and agricultural operations if they're in the surrounding area. I should note as well, policies in the official plan also speak to providing a private well on the site, and as the applicant is proposing an engineered drinking water system, the official plan amendment is also required to allow that as opposed to the private well. And I just wanted to highlight here on this where you can actually see the outline on that westerly portion of the property that is subject to the official plan amendment. The zoning bylaw, so the land is designated restricted agricultural. And so the restricted agricultural zone does allow for a single-family dwelling and a number of non-residential uses. However, a logistics terminal is not a use that is permitted in that zone. So the zoning is proposed to be amended to a general industrial zone that would permit that particular use. And it's also proposed to be in a site-specific general industrial zone because the parent general industrial zone does permit an accessory dwelling unit, which would not be appropriate on this site in relation to the surrounding rural industrial uses as well. So that's being proposed to be prohibited through the zoning bylaw as well. And again, this map just displaying the 6-hectare portion that is subject to the zoning. The proposed development itself, it's approximately 1,400 square meter building that's proposed to be used for warehousing, to be used for trucks that are going to be stopping to load up and then go and then leave the site. So that's primarily how the site is going to work, and the actual concept plan itself does provide sufficient room for parking and loading spaces, landscaping along the front yard and rear and side yards as well is being shown on that, as well as a potential proposed expansion to the rear of the building in the future if that ends up being warranted. In terms of public correspondence, we did receive correspondence in regards to this application. The first comment being related to traffic. So concerns were raised in regards to additional heavy traffic causing potential issues such as potholes and dust and dirt, and noting that road upgrades would likely be required. And the response to that would be that site plan control is required for this particular application. If these applications were approved, and a detailed traffic impact study would be required that would indicate potential road upgrades, and if they are required, they would be at the cost of the applicant. We also received a petition from residents on Italia Lane and on the east end of McAdoo's Lane, specifically requesting that the Montreal Battersea Street exit entrance onto McAdoo's be permanently restricted to truck traffic from utilizing that portion of the road. As a result of that, staff did request preliminary traffic information from the applicant in relation to traffic volumes, times, and proposed routes. And this particular application itself and the proposed development is proposing to use the Division Street entrance and exit as opposed to Montreal. And so for those reasons, and also being a designated emergency detour route by the Ministry of Transportation, we didn't feel it would be appropriate to close that section of the road. In addition to that, Montreal Street is also an arterial road that several businesses along McAdoo's have been relying on for several years. Noise was another issue that was brought up, particularly in relation to backup beepers and transport trucks' use of jack brakes, particularly in the middle of the night. And this was particularly relevant because those types of noise sources are not included in the city's noise bylaw. So, and again, in addition to the traffic impact study, site plan control will also require a noise impact study as well that will evaluate specifically for sensitive land uses and potential impacts to them from stationary transportation noise sources as well as the actual traffic impact noise sources as well. Noise studies will outline mitigative measures if the impacts are deemed to be found, which would be implemented through that site plan control process. And I should also note that this particular study has also been expanded, particularly in relation to these residents' concerns, where the noise study specialists are going to be going to the residents' homes who did express concerns to specifically monitor for backup beepers from their homes. The applicant is also looking into additional alternatives to backup beepers as well through the site plan control process. And I should mention one more. I apologize for that. The engineered water system, we also received another comment from a resident asking why in this particular circumstance and on this site an engineered water system would be supported by staff. And the reason for that would be that the applicant did drill 2 wells on the property, and their hydrogeologist did report back that there was insufficient water supply and quality issues as well, so they were unable to obtain a potable source of water. As a result of that, their professional engineer proposed an engineered water system, which was reviewed by our the Environment Division at the city, and confirmed that it could be done in accordance with the Ministry of Environment guidelines. As a result of that as well, staff looked at the provincial policy statement and had discussions with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs as well to confirm the interpretation that we were making in regards to that. And so we were satisfied that it was in compliance with the provincial policy statement. So the recommendation is that the rural industrial use is appropriate for the proposed location and compatible with surrounding land uses. Would also say it's even more compatible in that through the zoning, the residential use is proposed to be removed, which would be more compatible with the quarry and cement manufacturing facility than what is currently permitted. The proposal will accommodate an employment use that will support economic development in the municipality. An engineered water system is able to be accommodated on the site. And we feel that the applications comply with the provincial policy statement and meet the general intent of the official plan. And for those reasons, we're recommending approval of the applications. Next steps, if the applications are approved, the applicant may proceed with finalizing their severance application, and site plan application would have to be made and required as part of this as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation. Any questions from the committee? Gary, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. And since this application, I've sort of watched it move along a little bit since we've heard about it. And I appreciate the work that you've done on it. And I think I have had calls, and I submitted the petition on behalf of the residents, and I appreciate how you have dealt with them, and then hopefully they will have a chance to speak when it moves to council. But I do think that you've done a good job in preparing this as well for the rezoning and moving it along like this. I think that it's actually a good location for such a facility and purpose that way. And so I want to thank you for that. And I just want to make sure you know that I have followed this. We've listened to the constituents and the people, and I think you've addressed it well, and that hopefully they will have a chance to address any further concerns related to the noise and the traffic use. I mean, the road is used a lot, and I am of the opinion that we should actually be doing more for that area as a city. So that's another conversation, but I do feel that the city has let down some of the industrial area that way, but we can do better. I think it's actually a high potential area, but maybe that's something we should be talking about. But I do want to say that I recognize what you've done, and I recognize the voice of the citizens and how you've listened to them sensitively and worked toward having the best possible outcome. So I want to thank you for that.
Any other members of the speak? Okay. Any members of the public would like to speak? Go ahead.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you for your presentation. I did follow this along when it came here the first time, so I think you've been keeping up with the questions that were raised, so thanks for that. I've got one question with respect to the new material in Exhibit J, which is on pages 66 to 69. And that's a series of 4 photographs which show large trucks turning. And I'm wondering if that is on the east end of McAdoo's Lane when it is intersecting with, I guess, the extension of Montreal Street. And the reason I'm asking that is because I had the impression that the additional traffic would be going out to the west side. In other words, I guess to the extension of Division Street. The trucks that would be using it would be entering and exiting on that side. So I'm not sure if that's accurate, and then I'll just carry on a little bit more. Just examining the photographs, it looks like it's a very tight turn for vehicles of that size with the intersection that they have there. So my suggestion would be in line with what Councillor Oosterhoff was talking about. Since this is potentially an area of future development, if there could be a serious examination done of those intersections with a view to providing more space to allow those large vehicles to turn safely. Thank you.
Any other members of the public that would like to speak at this point? Thank you. Could I have a response to Mr. Dixon's questions, please?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. Yes, the pictures there, that is on the east end of McAdoo's Lane, where the trucks are shown in those diagrams. As noted, this particular application is being proposed to use the division side on the west end entrance and exit from that. We can take your comments back as well. You have had discussions with engineering as well in regards to this area. Anything needing to be done, potentially needing to be done, or in regards to initial potential to close that section of the road, it would need a much larger discussion also with the Ministry of Transportation, as it's being a designated detour route, and the ministry designating that as well. I think upgrades were done there quite a few years ago as well, and the ministry designating that as well has also officially determined that it is suitable for truck traffic in order to be able to do that, and have determined that it was suitable for trucks to be using at the time of emergencies as well. But those comments are definitely noted.
Thank you for your answer. Any other comments from the committee?
Yeah, thank you for that. And it is, I just want to say that I too will be carrying that further. I do have concerns about that road. That's something that we will be talking in depth about, I think. Thank you.
That closes the public section of the meeting of that part. I'd like to ask for someone to move the motion onto the floor. Again, Councillor Osanek. And I'm going to know, okay, Councillor Oosterhoff, thank you. Now that the motion is on the floor, could I ask you to vote in favor? All in favor? 4, that carries, thank you. On to the next item on our agenda is number C, file number D14-03-2017, comprehensive report 810 Middle Road, zoning bylaw amendment. There's no presentation. Any questions, or do I have to move it? No. Any questions from the committee? No questions? Any questions or comments from the public? No questions? Then I will move the motion. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Osanek, and again, Councillor Oosterhoff. Thank you. All those in favor? That carries 4-4. Next motion. Oops. Okay, so the next report is the addendum report, file number, right? File number D35-006-2017, supplementary report, 133 Dalton Avenue, official plan and zoning bylaw amendment, and I believe staff will speak to this.
Thank you, Thayer. A public meeting for this application was held on January 18th. The subject property is located within the city's Clyde Industrial Park, and a majority of the subject property is designated general industrial and environmental protection area in the official plan, and is within the industrial M zone and zoning bylaw number 8499. The proposal for the property is to allow for a broader range of permitted uses within the existing industrial building, which include business park uses. There will be no changes to the existing building footprint. A comprehensive report was prepared which recommended that a holding symbol be applied on the proposed uses, which include a medical office, medical clinic, dental office, personal service shop, and restaurant and vet clinic until a municipal industrial strategy for abatement, MISA hole, or manhole is available or could be made available. A supplementary report was prepared as the owner has since addressed the concerns of Utilities Kingston with respect to the requirements of a MISA manhole for the site. As such, a holding symbol is no longer required, and this has been reflected in the updated exhibits to the official plan amendments and zoning bylaw amendments applications, which are shown in the supplementary report.
Very much for your information. Any questions from the committee? Any questions from the public? Seeing none, I'd like to put the motion on the floor. Could I have someone, Councillor Osterhoff and Councillor Osanek, thank you. Now that it's on the floor, can we vote for this? All in favor? That's 4 all in favor. Thank you. Okay, now we're on report number D, file number D35-006-2017, comprehensive report, 133 Dalton Avenue, official plan and bylaw amendment. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none. Any questions from the public? Seeing none. I'd like a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Osanek, Councillor Osterhoff. Okay, now that it's on the floor, I'd like all in favor, please. And that carries vote 4-4. Thank you. No motions, no notice of motions, other business? Correspondence? No correspondence. Date and time of next meeting is scheduled for March 8th, not March 1st, March 8th, as we were instructed, at 6:30 here. Could I have a motion to adjourn? Councillor McLaren, thank you, and Councillor Osanek, thank you. We are adjourned. Oh, all in favor? All in favor? We're fine, thank you. Motion carried.